Number V, the revised paper could be better, right? In this case, it's epistemic, right? It's possible that the revised paper will be better. It's possible. Number W, my uncle can wiggle his ears, meaning can move his ears. Is ability, right? So my uncle has the ability, so it's deontic, right? Number X, animals are skinned and dumped like trash. We can't continue to be silent about this. In this case, it's like obligation, right? So it's deontic. We should not continue to be silent about this, okay? So now you can identify the meanings of each modal in like appropriate context. We'll just move along with modality, but we'll look at a particular case of modality. We'll look at legal language, how people use language to write laws and stuff, and look at how they use modals and modality expressions to write laws. And this topic is quite difficult. So your reading skills are very important. So our topic is still modality, okay? But we'll look at modality in legal language. And in this case, it's written legal language. So, but before we look at modality, I need to talk about legal language first, okay? Written legal language, because it's like a different style of language that ordinary people cannot understand. And even normal English speakers cannot understand either. So they have to have some kind of training in order to understand legal language. But this is how I will simplify the matter, okay? So the characteristics of the legal language is like, one of the characteristics is sentence length. But a lot of times we'll have, the length has to do with what we call binominal and multinominal expression, meaning people who write laws, they like to string together many nouns, right? Using conjunctions like and, or, right? So you can have two nouns together or many nouns together. Nominals are nouns, right? And multi, like many. So using and or. Like signed and delivered, for example, in whole or in part, meaning wholly, entirely, or partially, like that. Advice and consent, by or on behalf of someone, under or in accordance with. So you have to look at what is like after the and or, right? Or by the government, or by any government, public or local authority, or by any person other than the person claiming relief. So it's like including everyone, by the government, or by any other government, and so on, right? So you have to be careful about and or, but you know that they join only nouns, right, together. So you can see what's relevant for you to understand, okay? So another factor that makes it long is the clause structure. We have a lot of subordinate clauses or complex sentences, and we can talk about the different patterns based on whether it's left branching or right branching, okay? So let's start with left branching. Left branching meaning you have subordinate clauses, okay? Subordinate clauses to the left of the main clause. If you imagine syntax trees. Like in the first one here, what I underline here, right, you see, is the subordinate clause, okay? The main clause is bolded. The public authority shall, so far as reasonably practicable, give effect to that preference. So the main subject is public authority, shall is the modal verb, and then give effect to that preference. So that's the whole idea, right? But other things are like conditions, right? Other things are like conditions in different cases, like where, in one case, in the second case, and so on. So these are to the left of the main clause, right? So we call it left branching. So you have a lot of subordinate clauses before the main clause. So we call that left branching, okay? Because the main clause is like on the right-hand side of the syntax tree. And this subordinate clause modifies the main clause. Okay, so we call it left branching. So that's why it's complicated, because you have so many subordinate clauses, right, before you see the main clause, which is the main idea, right? In the second case, you have what we call nested. Nested or embedded or buried, meaning that it's nested, meaning it's inside. The subordinate clause is inside the main clause. Okay? So like in this one, you can see I underline the subordinate clause and I bold the main clause. So the main clause is very short, typically short, like the body is hereby abolished. Abolished meaning like just take out of effect, right? So destroy and so on. So the body is hereby abolished. That's the main clause. And everything else is subordinate clause, right? That modifies the body. What body? Which immediately before the coming and so on, right? So that's nested because it's inside the main clause. And then the next one is also nested, okay? Which is not one of the reserved matters to the end here, to crown. That modifies any matter, which matter, the matter which, and so on. So the main clause is this section in section 8 shall apply to Scotland subject to the following modifications and so on. So that's the main clause. So as long as you can find the main clause, you shouldn't have any problem, and you are aware of the binominals or multinomial conjunctions and so on, right? So as long as you can find out the main clause, then you shouldn't have any problem reading, okay? So we have left branching, nested in the middle, right? So the last one is right branching. So right branching has to do with the fact that subordinate clauses are like towards the end of the sentence, right? And the main clause is before the subordinate clause. So in this case, subsection 1, shall not prohibit, right? That's the main clause. Shall not is the modal. Shall not prohibit, right? Under section 8 of conditions A and B, and so on, right? Or in the last one, the Secretary of State shall take such step as he considers appropriate, and so on. That the main clause is bolded, and everything else is the subordinate clause. Okay? So when you read a long clause like this, a long sentence, you have to identify what the main clause is and what the subordinate clause is. Okay? And you will be fine. And then finally, anaphoric reference has to do with the use of personal pronouns. Anaphoric, right? To refer. Reference is to refer. In this case, in legal writing, you don't use a lot of personal pronouns. He, him, they, us. You won't see those pronouns because legal language has to be precise, has to be accurate. And when you use pronouns, sometimes it could be problematic as to what you refer to, he or him, who is he, who is him, and so on. So legal writing prefers to repeat all the nouns, okay? Like the member firm, grantor, the member firm, you see that the same noun is repeated over and over again. Sometimes it's like redundant, but legal writing prefers redundancy because they like to be accurate, right? Just for practice, can you locate where the main clause is, okay? In these two examples. So the first one is here, and the second one is here. The second one I took from Apple iOS 6 agreement, and there's the Korean version. I cannot read the Korean version because it's like too complex for me, right? But this is the English version. So I'll give you maybe 5 to 10 minutes to underline the main clause for me, and everything else you could put in the brackets, right, as subordinate clauses. Okay? If you have questions, I'll walk around to help you. You know that in English, right, before we go on, in English, there are some signal words for subordinate clauses, right? You have signal words like that, for example, think that, right? So that would be the subordinate clause. You have signal words like that, or when, or where, or why, like that. So these are all like signaling words that tell you, oh, you are coming across a subordinate clause, right? So you must have some kind of signal words in English. Or as, like that. Which, something like that. So these are all signal words. So where's the main clause for the first one? So I'll walk around and help you. Okay, let's look at the first one. The first one, you see the word when, right? So you know that it's a signaling word, so it cannot be the main clause. So we have when the service to be provided are designed professional, right? So for the subordinate clause, you have the subject, the service to be provided, and then the verb are designed professional. That's it, right? So that's it. So that's your subordinate clause. So with this as a subject, and with this as the verb of the subordinate clause, right? Clear? Now, everything else then is the main clause, right? So we have services to be performed by a design professional consultant shall. So this is the main clause. So this is the subject of the main clause, and the verb is shall. Shall what? Indemnify, protect, defend, and hold, right? You see, it's like everything is joined together with the word and, right? Shall indemnify meaning to cancel, protect, defend, and hold harmless, right? So all those verbs after shall. So that's the main clause. Local agency and its employee, official, agent. So all these people are string together with the word and, you can see, right? For all claims, demands, costs, or liability that arise out of. So this is another subordinate clause. You see that, right? And until here, right? So that arises out of, where is that? Arise out of, pertain to, or relate to. So many verbs in a row, right? And relate to the negligence, recklessness, or willful misconduct, right? So all these nouns joined by an or. Of consultant, right? So that's the noun. Of who? Of consultant, and who else? It's officers, employee, agents, and so on. So I think the difficulty lies in the fact that maybe you're confused by many nominals joined together, and also you cannot find the main clause, right? So can you do this to number 2? So I'll give you 3 more minutes to do number 2. Any injury or any incidental, special, or indirect, or direct or coincidental, whatever. So in other words, in short, Apple shall not be responsible for any injury, right? And other things are like things that they include in order to make their conditions very straightforward, very accuracy, and very like comprehensive. Like what kind of damage? Like damages for loss of profit, corruption, or loss of data. They try to include all possible cases. So that's why you see a lot of ands and a lot of ors, right? So in that sense, in here, such damages. So they specify many type of damages like loss or loss of data, damages to personal self, and also to other people. So they try to include all possible cases. That's why it's long. But the real main clause is Apple shall not be liable for anything, for any injury. So as long as you can find the main clause, you should be able to do it, okay? So that's for practice. Now, let's look at next page. I don't know what the Korean version is like, so you guys know more Korean than me, so you can see the difference between the Korean version and the English version. Since legal language, or since law intends to control the behavior of people, right? Laws tend to control the behavior of people, right? They have to use a lot of modality, especially deontic modality, right? Because deontic has to do with obligation, has to do with permission, and so on, right? So you'll find a lot of deontic modality in legal language, okay? But generally speaking, when you want to issue a command or when you want to issue a directive to someone, in real life, you have so many strategies available, right? And this is like all the available strategies that you can use to issue a command or to issue a directive to other people. Okay? So you have this table, right? And the situation is I request to borrow Junsong's credit card. Okay? Junsong is very generous and he's rich, so he's happy to treat us to a meal. Okay? You can go and ask him. 주세요. Now, there are many ways to issue a request, directive, or command. Like I have like 4 main ways, right? Ranging from indirect request to the last one, direct request, right? So indirect request is indirect because you don't make it known to the person that it's a request. You don't make it known to the person. You don't make it obvious to a person that you are asking him to do something. You are telling him to do something. So you can have like hints, strong or mild hints or strong hints. Like, I know you are a generous person and you always want to buy me gifts. So that's a way to tell him, can I borrow your credit card, right? So that's hint, very indirect because you don't say to him, can I borrow or can you buy me something, right? Or a stronger hint might be, I've left my wallet at home today. So if he is a smart person, he would know that, okay, he can lend me some money or his credit card. So as long as you know that he's smart, then the hints will work, okay? But then you can also use the hearer-based conditions and speaker-based condition, depending on who you focus on. If you focus on the hearer, you would address your requests or directives towards the hearer. Like, could you lend me your credit card? This is more direct, right? Because it's the act of asking itself. Could you lend me? Or would you lend me? May I use your credit card? Different types of modality, right? May, would, or could, right? Or you can make a suggestion. How about giving your credit card to me, for example, okay? Or you can focus on yourself by talking about your wishes or your desire and needed. So you can see that you focus on yourself. I would like to, or I want, or I need to, right? So that's your focus. So he would, if he consents that, he would lend you the credit card. Or you could do direct request. More direct, the best, the straightforward might be statement of obligation. You have to lend me your credit card, and so on. Performative, you name the act. I would like to ask, so you name it. I'm asking. I ask or I require you, so that's what we call performative, right? Because as you are performing the act, you name the act of asking or requiring. And then imperatives or elliptical phrases and so on. Your credit card, please, and so on. So these are different ways that we can go about issuing a command or directive in everyday life. But what I want to do now is to focus on how legal language does it, right? How legal language or what strategies legal language uses in order to issue commands or directives to people. Do you think it would use indirect requests? Do you think it would use elliptical methods, and so on? So we'll look at how legal language does it. So I have different examples here, maybe 10 of them. So what you have to do is, first you have to understand the message, right? So you have to locate the main clause, okay? And you have to look at what kind of modality, what kind of directive strategy they use in order to tell you to do something. Is it direct? Is it like speaker-based condition or hearer-based condition, and so on, okay? Like in the first one, I just give that as an example where there's no modality expressed. Here, the Infant Relief Act, so that's the name of the law. And the Betting and Loans Infant Act 1892 are hereby repealed. There is no modality there. I just put that there just to show you that in a lot of cases, in legal language, you don't have modality, but it's just a fact. Are hereby repealed. Repealed is like to cancel. Okay? In this case, there's no modality. and it's issued as a statement of fact, right? So the writer doesn't use any of these strategies that we study. But in number two, the writer used some modal verbs. For example, shall here. Is there only one? Shall there, and then is there anything else? Would be, right? And shall. So what I want you to do is, again, to locate the main clause, the subject and the verb of the main clause, and see what type of meaning the shall here expresses or the would be expresses. Is it epistemic or deontic, and what type of strategy that they are using. Okay? Hearer-based, speaker-based, or direct request, and so on. Okay? So there are about maybe 9 examples or so, or 10 examples or so. I'll give you, maybe we can do 5 of them today. Okay? I'll give you about maybe 10 minutes to work on 1 to 5, or 2 to 5. And I'll walk around and help you. So first, you have to understand the message by locating the main clause, right? One way to locate the main clause is to locate the subordinate clauses first, because that's easier. You can locate the subordinate clauses by looking at signaling words, right? Like where, like if, right? Where, if, there are signaling words for subordinate clauses. So you have a signaling word plus a clause and then the main clause, right? So the clause here you have subject and the verb. The main clause here you have the subject and the verb like that. So as long as you can do something like that, then you will understand the message. And the position can be like different. The main clause could come before the subordinate clause. Guys, let's look at the second. Let's look at the second one. Where is the main clause? Where's the main clause? Just that short. That main message is like that. That person, the person that the writer referred to before, right? That person shall be so liable, meaning that person shall be responsible. Okay? That's it. That's the main clause. And then other things like notwithstanding, that's like, notwithstanding is despite, right? So despite the fact that the misrepresentation was done fraudulently and so on, was fake and so on. So that person is still responsible, right? So in this case, the modal is shall, and what type of meaning is it? Deontic or epistemic? Deontic or epistemic? That person shall be deontic, right? So it's like that person is obliged to be responsible. That person must be responsible for the consequence, right, of the law. Right? So this is deontic, right? And because it states an obligation, so in the table we can identify that it's a direct request, right? Statement of obligation, number 6. Because it's direct and it's a statement of obligation, that person must be liable, like that. That person must be responsible, right? In the subordinate clause, we have this if clause, right? If the person making the misrepresentation would be so liable had the misrepresentation been made fraudulently. So you have the if clause, like the hypothetical type, right? Unreal, irrealist, right? Unreal. So in this case, we have would be so liable. Right? Again, it's a modal that expresses a deontic meaning, but that deontic meaning is very low in terms of degree, right? Low deontic, because you see that it's would, not will, right? And it's in the unreal, hypothetical situation of if clause. So it's deontic, but low level. but still it's number 6, statement of obligation. Okay, but weak and not high level of obligation because it's hypothetical. So we do it like that. Okay. So far so good. Number 3. Let's look at number 3. Number 3 is shorter, so you should have less difficulty identifying the main clause. The main clause in number 3 is where? Where's the main clause? Where's the main clause in number 3? All sums, right? Shall is the verb. Be recoverable. That's it. All sums shall be recoverable. Right? All sums shall be recoverable. Right? Other things are like things that the writer uses to modify, like all sum paid or payable. So that modifies all sums, right? In this case, you see shall. What kind of modality is it? The meaning. Is it epistemic or is it deontic? Deontic, right? And it's the same kind of shall in number 2, right? So it's a statement of obligation. So it's number 6. Very direct strategy, right? The sums must be, all the sums must be, shall be is must be, recoverable from him, from the person. Number 4. So that's it, right? There's no other modal. So number 4. Let's move to number 4. Where's the main clause? There's only one clause. So nothing shall be taken, right, to prejudice any other remedy available. So that's the main clause. Okay? Nothing shall be taken. In this case, again, we see the use of shall that has the deontic modality and its statement of obligation as well. Okay? Nothing can be taken, nothing shall be taken, nothing must be taken. Okay? This part, goods are to be regarded as in consumer use. R2 has the same meaning as must, so it's deontic. And number 6 as well. Direct request, direct command telling the reader to look at the goods as like that, as such. Number 5, which is the last one that we'll do today. Number 5. Where's the main clause? In relation to, that's the prepositional phrase, right? In relation to, it means concerning something, about something, with respect to something. So you see the main clause here. The requirement, right, is, that's the main clause, right? The requirement is, and then you have the subordinate clause here. The requirement is that it should be fair and reasonable, right? Fair and reasonable, same thing. You can see the use of and to join, like fair and reasonable. So it should be, in this case, is a modal, right? And obligation too. And is same thing, which is number 6, right? But the level of obligation is in the middle, right? It's not as high as shall, it's not as low as would, but it should be fair, meaning it has the obligation to be fair, right? But not must. So kind of medium level. But still it's direct and it's straightforward. Right? So from 1 to 5, you can see that in legal writing, you only have, or you, in most cases, you have deontic modality and it's straightforward request, right? Most of the time, it's in the form of straightforward request to the reader or to other people involved, right? So because law, the language of the law has to be precise, has to be accurate, and so on. So next time we'll come back and continue with 6 to 10, and we'll continue with modality in other kinds of context. Okay.